In 1375, a cartographer working for the Crown of Aragon produced what would become one of the most famous maps of the medieval world, known today as the Catalan Atlas. It depicted a ruler seated upon a throne holding a large piece of gold in his hand. The ruler was identified as Mansa Musa, Emperor of Mali. For medieval Europeans, the image represented a distant land of immense wealth. For historians, it represents something far more significant, evidence that by 14th century, West Africa was integrated into the political, economic and intellectual networks of the wider world. Yet, despite its importance, the history of Mali remains unfamiliar to many people today. This was an empire that controlled major trans-Saharan trade routes, governed vast territories, fostered centers of learning that attracted scholars from across the Islamic world, and produced rulers whose influence reached far beyond the African continent. Its history challenges long-standing assumptions about Africa's place in the world history. This is the story of the Mali Empire. Its origins, its institutions, its rulers, its scholars, and its enduring legacy. The history of Mali did not begin with Mali. Long before the empire emerged, West Africa was already home to complex societies, connected by trade, migration, and political organization. Among the most important of these early states was the Ghana Empire, known to Arab geographers as the Kingdom of Ghana or Wagadu. Between the 8th and 11th centuries, Ghana became a major power in the Western Sudan, controlling trade in gold and other commodities moving across the Sahara Desert. The wealth generated by these exchanges linked West Africa to North Africa and by extension to the Mediterranean and the Middle Eastern worlds. Merchants transported gold south to north and north to south. These commercial networks would later form the economic foundation upon which Mali would rise. The decline of Ghana during the 11th and 12th centuries did not bring an end to political life in the region. Instead, power gradually shifted toward emerging Mande-speaking communities in the upper Niger Basin. It was from this environment that Mali would eventually emerge. The origins of the Mali Empire are closely associated with one of the most important figures in African history, Sundiata Keita. Much of what is known about Sundiata comes from oral traditions preserved by griots over centuries and later recorded by historians and anthropologists. As with many early historical figures, separating legend from verifiable facts is not always straightforward. Nevertheless, there is a broad scholarly agreement that Sundiata was instrumental in the formation of the Mali Empire during the 13th century. According to both oral traditions and historical reconstructions, Sundiata led a coalition of Mande states against the Soso ruler, Somahoro Kante. The decisive confrontation occurred around 1235 at the Battle of Kirina. The victory established Sundiata as the dominant political authority in the region and laid the foundations for a new imperial state. What followed was not merely military expansion, it was state formation. Territories were integrated into a larger political structure, trade routes were secured, administrative systems were developed. A new imperial center emerged along the Niger River corridor. By the end of Sundiata's reign, Mali had become one of the most significant political powers in West Africa. At its peak, the Mali Empire stretched across territories that today include parts of Mali, Senegal, Guinea, Mauritania, Gambia, and neighboring regions. Governing such a vast territory required more than military strength. It required institutions. The emperor, known as the Mansa, stood at the center of political authority. However, Local rulers often retained significant influence within their regions, provided they acknowledged imperial authority and contributed taxes or military support. This arrangement allowed Mali to incorporate diverse populations without requiring direct administration over every community. The empire's strategic location gave it control over important trade corridors, linking the forests of West Africa with the Sahara and beyond. Control of commerce became one of the principal sources of state revenue and political power. Gold production was especially significant. While popular accounts sometimes exaggerate Mali's dominance of global gold supplies, there is little doubt that West African gold played a major role in the medieval economy. For centuries, much of the gold reaching North Africa and parts of Europe originated from regions under Mali's influence. No ruler is more closely associated with Mali than Mansa Musa. He came to power around 1312 and presided over what many historians regarded as the empire's golden age. His reign coincided with a period of political stability, economic prosperity, and international visibility. The event that brought him worldwide recognition was his pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324. Pilgrimage was one of the central obligations of Islam for those able to undertake it. For rulers, it could also serve diplomatic and political purposes. Mansa Musa's journey attracted extraordinary attention. Contemporary accounts describe a large entourage traveling through North Africa toward Arabia. Although numeric estimates vary between sources and should be treated cautiously, there is widespread agreement that the scale of the expedition impressed observers throughout the region. The pilgrimage introduced Mali to wider audiences and strengthened connections with scholars, merchants, and political elites across the Islamic world. Upon returning home, Mansa Musa invested in religious, educational, and architectural projects. His reign marks a period in which Mali became more visibly connected to broader intellectual networks stretching across North Africa and the Middle East. Few cities in African history have attracted as much fascination as Timbuktu. Located near the southern edge of the Sahara and connected to major trade routes, Timbuktu emerged as an important commercial and intellectual center during the Mali Empire. Its growth was linked to geography. Merchants traveling between North Africa and West Africa passed through the region, bringing not only goods but also ideas. By the 14th century, Timbuktu had become known throughout parts of the Islamic world as a center of scholarship. Among its most important institutions was Sankore. Often referred to as the University of Sankore, it was not a university in the modern sense. Rather, it was a network of scholars, of teachers, and learning circles centered around mosques and educational institutions. Students studied subjects including Islamic jurisprudence, theology, grammar, mathematics, astronomy, and history. The city's manuscript culture was particularly significant. Books were copied, collected, bought, and sold. Thousands of manuscripts have survived to the present day, providing valuable evidence of intellectual life in West Africa across several centuries. These manuscripts challenge outdated assumptions that knowledge production on the continent was exclusively oral. West Africa possessed both rich oral traditions and sophisticated written traditions, and Timbuktu stood at the intersection of the two. The Mali Empire was more than its rulers and trade networks. It was a society composed of farmers, merchants, artisans, scholars, religious leaders, and communities spread across diverse ecological zones. Agriculture formed the foundation of everyday life for much of the population. The Niger River supported farming, fishing, transportation, and trade. Alongside economic activity, social institutions helped preserve collective memory and cultural identity. Among the most important were the Griots. Griot served as custodians of oral traditions. They preserved genealogies, recounted historical events, and transmitted cultural knowledge across generations. Their role extended beyond entertainment. They functioned as historians, advisors, diplomats, and educators. Much of what is known about early Mali survives because of these oral traditions. Religion also played an important role within the empire. Islam spread gradually through trade networks and became increasingly influential among political elites. However, Islamic practices often coexisted with older religious traditions rather than immediately replacing them. The process of cultural adaptation reflected a broader pattern seen across many African societies. Religious change was rarely simple. Instead, communities incorporated new ideas while maintaining aspects of existing cultural practices. Like all empires, Mali eventually faced challenges that weakened its authority. Following the reign of Mansa Musa, succession disputes and political fragmentation reduced central control. Some provinces sought greater independence. Trade patterns shifted, regional competitors gained strength. At the same time, neighboring states began asserting themselves more aggressively. Among these emerging powers was Songhai. Initially one of Mali's subordinate territories, Songhai gradually expanded its influence along the Niger River. By the 15th century, it had become the dominant political force in much of the Western Sudan. The modern Republic of Mali gained independence from France on the 22nd of September 1960. Like many post-colonial states, it has faced political, economic, and security challenges, yet the historical legacy of Mali remains visible. The names of Sundiata Keita, Mansa Musa, Timbuktu, and Dijen continue to resonate across Africa and beyond. Musicians, writers, historians, and cultural practitioners draw upon this heritage in different ways. The preservation of manuscripts, oral traditions, historical sites, and cultural practices reflects ongoing efforts to promote and interpret the past. History is not simply a record of what happened. It is also a conversation about how societies understand themselves. More than 7 centuries ago, the rulers of Mali governed one of the most influential states of the medieval world. Its wealth attracted international attention. Its scholars contributed to intellectual traditions that crossed continents. Its cities connected diverse people through trade, learning, and exchange. Today, the empire no longer exists, but its legacies remain in the manuscripts of Timbuktu, in the stories preserved by Griot, in the historical memory of West Africa, and in the growing recognition that Africa's past is not a separate chapter of world history. Understanding Mali is therefore not only about understanding Africa, it is about understanding the interconnected history of humanity itself. If you enjoyed this documentary, subscribe to Taifa Africa as we continue to explore the people, places, and civilizations that have shaped African continent and the wider world.